Hello everyone. In case you are part of my channel, so definitely some or other of you must be willing to become a forensic expert. And in the lecture today we will discuss about what is the role of forensic investigator, that too in detail. So just stay with me till the end. And by the end you will be able to know whether this is a right career option for you or not. Before we know about what a investigator does in forensic science, it is important to know what this term forensic refers to. Okay, so forensic is basically derived from the word forum. It involves the use of scientific procedures, scientific method, and methodologies in order to solve the crime, in order to deal with the criminal justice system. So forensic investigator basically is involved in this procedure in order to the foremost role of the investigator would be to gather all the evidences that could be helpful in order to solve the crime. So the part of execution is done by the investigator. Okay, in case policeman is responsible for catching the culprit, doctor responsible for treating the patient. Similarly, the forensic scientist is responsible for doing all these sort of works that could be helpful to gather the evidence that could help the administration to reach the culprit, to figure out who is actually responsible for the crime being done. Okay, then why this lecture is important for you, why this session is important for you, because it will help you to figure out whether the path you have decided for you to become the forensic investigator, it's actually fruitful, or is it actually something that you are willing to do. In this article lecture whatsoever, we will deal with everything that a forensic investigator does. So here are the rules. A forensic investigator, they have to figure out whether the crime has been actually committed and who is the person responsible for commission of the crime. Then if the person that is suspected, are there actually enough evidence that are in favor of our suspicion or that are against our suspicion. So all this sort of things will be done by the investigator himself, the in charge himself. Now here I have highlighted some of the duties and some of the rules that would be done by the forensic investigator. In order to know all this, you may read it out. Just pause the video and read it out. However, I will explain it in a nutshell. So, first of all, forensic investigator has to figure out if the crime has been actually committed or it is just a persona that they are just trying to show if the crime is done, and whereas there is nothing like that. Like in case of arson, in order to falsely claim the insurance, sometime companies, industries put fire by themselves, and it is a fire, not an arson, but they pretend that it is the case of an arson. So whose duty will be, it will be to figure out whether it is actual arson or fire. Okay, then in some of the cases where it is suicidal hanging or a murder is tried to portray as suicidal hanging, whereas at times a suicidal hanging might be misunderstood as a murder. Then it will be duty of investigator to collect the sufficient evidence which will be in favor or against the suspicion. The points that I have formally explained you will be now explained in detail. Okay, so the first point that we will deal with is, has a crime been actually committed? So in order to figure out whether the crime has been actually committed, it is the duty of forensic investigator to collect sufficient evidence, because evidence have the tendency to prove or disapprove the witnesses, to prove or disapproves our preconceptions, what we have thought while we initially made the perceptions, all those perceptions that have been made by initially looking at the crime scene. Here are some of the examples. However, I've already explained you the examples of arson and hanging cases. So here are two examples. First is of motorcyclist. If the in case some accident happens and we have made an assumption that must be the motorcyclist was drunk, but this will be confirmed when the test of blood alcohol will be done. Without that, you could not just say that a person that met an accident was actually drunk. Then In the case of some sexual assault, the suspicion is made that some assault must have happened with the victim. But unless the examination of semen on the vaginal swab will be done, we could not say it clearly. We could not just make a statement or a blind guess about it. Okay, because it might be the question of someone's life. uh, what if a person who is responsible for the crime gets punished? Then it will be a matter of concern as well. Then who is responsible? It is somewhat related to the first point. For an example, a latent fingerprint is developed, and it is a latent fingerprint means a fingerprint which is not visible via naked eyes. If it is recovered from the crime scene and the criminal's print are already present in the database, in the AFIS or somewhere, then we can say that yeah, that person was actually present at the crime scene and he is responsible. He might be responsible for commission of crime. Similarly, if we have DNA profile of someone, then it is a easier way to guess, to catch the culprit. Okay, so some kind of evidence that are knowingly unknowingly left by the culprit on the scene of crime can help you as a forensic investigator to figure out if who is responsible, if the person you think is actually responsible for commission of crime or not. Then we have this third point, which is again somewhat related to the second one. Is the suspect actually responsible? At times, a person who is suspected of crime commission is not actually responsible. The evidences are falsely framed against them in order to prove that they are they are the one who committed the crime. But it might not always be true. You cannot just trust something that you see, because there might be the story framed behind. There might be some or the other suspicions involved, so you have to be very suspicious. You have to be very careful. You have to be kind of paranoid in order to figure out if the suspicion is framed or the suspicion is actual. Then, irrespective of any support received from the scientist, this is the point that I have already explained to you. You can read it once. Okay. Then the usual diligent police investigator often produces a suspect, an investigator, till the scientist looks at it. If police believes that the person is responsible for the crime commission, then the court will never blindly believe them unless there is some expert witness involved. Expert has to make their opinion whether the person brought up by police is actually the one behind the crime commission or not. Fine. Examination of material left on the victim or at the scene is often seen before we we reach to any conclusion. Then examination on clothing and property is also taken into the consideration. Entire crime scene is thoroughly searched before making any kind of uh, guess statement or anything. Then in continuation, we have all these 3 points that again highlight the role of the forensic investigator. Forensic investigator has to be impartial, competence, and they must follow all the ethics, and they must try to maintain the integrity before making any statement. The scientist should only give the evidence on work carried out personally or under their supervision. It is important that the evidence being collected should be under the supervision of the scientist. Okay, however, another evidences which are made under the oath are also of great importance, so both has their own significant importance. Then scientific examination are relied on for legal purpose, and they should be based on the scientific methods and the protocols that are previously prescribed. It means you are not allowed to do something out of the box, that are not present in the record, that are not there in the protocol, that are not there in the database. Whatsoever you do, being a forensic investigator, you should be there behind the lines, behind the borders that have been drawn. Do not cross the limit or line that are earlier prescribed. Fine. Scientific findings require interpretation on the basis of any interpretation that are already made. So whatever you say, there should be base or proof, whether it can be a book or the record or any of the conclusions previously made, or something that has already been there in the existence. Okay, so everything you say, every statement you make requires a proof, requires a base, that like every contact leaves a trace, so there must be some of the base which made you say so. Must be some reference based on which you are making the statement, and this is what all is asked in courtrooms, which is why all these 3 points are extremely important. This is how work of forensic scientists is related to the legal justice system. So read these all points once carefully. Then the last point, this is the last segment of our lecture, duties of the forensic scientist. We have already discussed about the duties so far, and here are some of the duties that were left and probably would not have been covered by me, so we can discuss about it now itself. Examine the material collected or submitted in order to provide information previously unknown or to corroborate information already available. Means you have to examine the material that you correct properly. In case some or the other information would be asked from you, you won't be speechless at that point of time. For an example, if you collect a white or let us take an example of, okay, a red colored liquid. Now the claims are made that it is blood. So without any information, without the thorough examination, you should not make the claim that it is blood. However, it must be blood looking liquid. Nobody could just claim that by looking at the red color liquid that it is blood. What if it is portrayed as blood and it is not a blood? Okay, so there won't be any difference between you and a layman person and you being a scientific officer, in case we start doing that. Then to differentiate between a hair and a thread, this is all that has to be done by the expert themselves. Then provide the result of any examination in a report that will enable the investigator to identify an offender or corroborate other evidence. A report has to be provided by you. Report must contain everything that is required to um, identify whether the suspicion that we have made is true or not, and it should corroborate with the other evidences that probably would have been found at the scene of the crime, so that the perpetrator that we are suspecting for, that could be the reason for commission of crime, could be proved guilty in the court. And if a person who is not the perpetrator should not be guilty, then present written and verbal evidence of the court to enable it to reach the appropriate decision of guilt or innocence. So, a forensic investigator proves a main role, or I should say a key role, in order to help in the smooth functioning of criminal justice system, in order to make the courtroom, in order to let the courtroom reach to some conclusion, because it is very important that the guilty should not escape, and the one who is guilt free, one who is innocent should not be hanged or should not be punished. This is where a forensic investigator plays a key role. Your report has a significant importance at this point of time. So it is a job of not a job, just not just a job, it is a duty. It is a duty which has a large number of responsibility and has to be done wisely, without any biasness and greed as well. Okay, then this is it for the day. I hope many of you must have got a clear idea of how things work in forensic science and how a forensic investigator proceeds or works with their investigation, and what is their role in criminal justice system as well. So thanks a lot, and do share this lecture with the friends who are willing to try their hands in the field of forensic science.